The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect that of the HHN TV or its constituent entities. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. I'm Drew Duncan. The show's fired up, and we are live. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Take a device to play Fired Up by Drew Duncan, iTunes, iHeart. Wherever you're listening, I am there. You can just Google Fired Up by Drew Duncan or download the HHN TV app, a.k.a. the Hip Hop Network, available on all smart devices, your iPhone, your iPad, your smart TV, wherever you are, they are. And, of course, I am on WBFR Radio, Block 50 Radio. Block50radio.com is live 24/7, 365. Plenty to get to today. We're going to be talking about Rael and Teen. We're going to be talking about Chiefs and Ravens tonight. New helmets in the NFL. We're going to be talking about Bill Belichick. He's on InstaFace now. We're going to be talking about Patrick Surtain, the second $96 million is what the Denver Broncos have reportedly paid that man. Well, obviously the big news is going to be Rael and Teen, right? So, Rael and Teen, VP for the Washington Commanders. By the way, he's been suspended, but I'm sure you know that by now. Long and the short of it is, Buddy went on what he thought was 2 different dates. Come to find out, that was an undercover investigative journalist who set him up. Literally, that's what happened. Now, people may not like it, but the reality of the situation is this. It's going to be really hard to sue for defamation if any of this is true. And I guarantee you that's what the NFL is going to be looking at. That's what Washington's going to be looking at. Why? Because when it all boils down to it, it's really all about 2 things. Number one, it is all about controlling the perception of your teams in your league. And number 2, it is about controlling the narrative. That's literally what it boils down to. I mean, come on, think about it. The NFL was so quick to say the Miami Dolphins were guilty of tampering with Tom Brady. But they were also very quick to say that the Miami Dolphins did not tank. Well, the whole reason why they were allegedly tanking was because they were trying to influence Tom Brady by saying, we're going to get some really high draft picks. That means we're going to get some really great new talent in here. Bizarre, man. Now, just because they were tampering doesn't mean that they were tanking. But the point of what I'm saying is the NFL, even if Miami was guilty, I guarantee you they were very quick to protect themselves, because do not forget when this whole thing went on with the Washington Commanders this last time, and Dan Snyder and all that stuff and emails that were coming out, and then everything blew up with John Gruden. Let's not forget that Roger Goodell admitted that he found a lot of different things, but he wasn't going to say what was going on, and he wasn't going to say who was getting punished with what. So by controlling the narrative, he was controlling the perception of everybody in the NFL. They didn't mind not controlling the perception of John Gruden. They didn't mind not controlling the perception of Dan Snyder, but they damn sure minded protecting the rest of the league with whatever the hell was going on. I'm not saying what John Gruden said or did was okay. What I am saying is they were very picky and choosy, which goes right along with what he was talking about. If anybody saw it from Rael and Teen, essentially what he was talking about, the NFL doesn't really care, and it's all performative. That's exactly what he called it. What was performative? Well, it's all this stuff about social injustice and them giving a damn when they don't. It's all to make us look good. NFL cares. Folks, I've been saying that for years. Okay, this isn't news to me. I am classically trained. I studied mass communications with an emphasis on sports analysis. I was taught very literally every trick in the book. I was taught about programming. I was taught about selectivism. I was taught about selective programming. I was taught about everything. And the reality is, the NFL doesn't give a damn. It has to change its look. And he talked about the George Floyd situation. Think about it. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, as explosive as that wasn't enough to truly get the NFL to really change. It took George Floyd and what happened with him. I'm not going to get into it. I am going to tell you that it was murder. I don't give a damn if you agree with me or not. Yes, he had a criminal history. We're not debating his criminal history. The debate is, how is it that he's cuffed in the back seat of the car, then yanked out, then a knee is on his neck for over 9 minutes? Folks, if that's you or me, we're going up for murder charges. Any cop worth their salt will tell you a lot of guys get back there, they kick, scream, hoot, and holler. They're pissed off. They're about to go to jail. He's not there to be judge and jury. I'm not saying that I'm okay with George Floyd's criminal past. In fact, nobody is saying that. What we're saying is, if you believe in the criminal justice system and you believe it holds water, then you might as well let them take care of it. That's pretty fucking simple. Look, this is a league that is working overtime to control narratives right now. Back in 2021, the NFL decided that it was going to start limiting media. Not everybody was getting passes anymore. Why are they limiting media? Well, when you go to these NFL teams and companies now, what do they ask you for? They ask you for a written letter of a plan of action. And what does that mean? Well, how are you going to cover our team? How many social media followers do you have? How are you going to cover our team means, what are you going to say about us? Do you have anything that shows that you've covered our team before? Because they want to look at these things and go, I don't know if it's going to look good for one of our guys to be interviewed by this individual. They want to control the narrative of how everything looks. So if somebody finds out something like this, somehow they don't want somebody to be one-on-one about it. They don't want anybody falling into a sneaky trap, a bad situation. So by controlling the narrative, you're controlling the perception. You see that? This is the same NFL that will fine you for talking bad about referees. It's the same NFL and NBA and NHL that says you're not allowed to speak out against the officials. Why? Because we need to control the narrative and we need to control the perception. We'll put it out there. What do they always say? We're looking into it. We'll make a decision. The NBA sometimes even puts out a notice. Oh, yeah, that was the wrong thing to do at that time. Okay, that doesn't correct it when it needed corrected. The game still stands as is. So what is even the point? But they just sweep it under the rug and move on. No big deal. Again, controlling the narrative is controlling the perception. Written plan of action. What are you going to say about us? We need to know. If we think you're going to be a hindrance, we're not going to allow you in. We don't want you around our guys in the locker room. We don't want you asking certain questions. We don't want you doing this. We don't want you doing that. Look, when you get accepted from UFC, Bellator, now PFL, the NFL, the NBA, they give you a long laundry list of codes that you are supposed to abide by. You'd be surprised at some of the BS writing that's in these statements. Not drinking is one thing because you're not supposed to drink on a job any damn way. Not cheering one way for a fighter or a team or whatever. That's nothing to me. It's all the other stuff. Hey, these are questions that we don't want you to ask. And I've experienced it. I had this from a sports news and information director who actually got me fired because he didn't like the way the narrative changed after I interviewed a baseball coach that they didn't give him what he wanted, so he went to a rival school. And everybody was all mad at him until I interviewed him, and then all of a sudden the perception changed. They couldn't control the narrative anymore, so it's, hey, get that guy the hell out of here. Hell, I got chewed out because I said I didn't like KFC chicken. I got chewed out because I took the company car and I went to Pizza Hut with a couple of the new employees, and another business that was a sponsor called and said, well, why weren't you guys over here? We sponsor you. These $100 million companies complain like 2-year-old children. Why? Because they want to control the narrative so that way they can control the perception, because in business, perception is everything. Everything. Perception is everything. And really, when you think about it, when he called Roger Goodell a puppet, what does the commissioner even really do? He just basically carries out the bid of the other owners who vote on things, and then they tell him, go make it happen. Now, according to the NFL and their website, these are their words, the commissioner has influence. Well, Roger Goodell must not have a whole hell of a lot of influence for a lot of things, because I remember very vividly the NFLPA and the players going to Tagliabue going, bro, can you please step in here? So whatever was going on, they didn't like what was happening with Roger Goodell. And don't forget that Tagliabue didn't have the best reputation either. So a guy that they all hated, they all ended up calling. Can you use your influence to get some things happening around here? Look, what is this all about? It's all about the bottom dollar. When they advertise about social injustice, when they advertise about anything, it is all about the bottom dollar. Everything is. To that point, Rael's 100% correct. They don't give one rat's ass about anybody's struggle. Marketing to underprivileged kids, knowing that they will figure out a way to scrape up the money to go and buy their shoe. The NCAA used to pay coaches hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or these outsiders, Nike, they would come in, they would pay these coaches hundreds of thousands of dollars to convince their kids to wear their brands. And meanwhile, while these kids are walking around like billboards, they were told, you can't make any of your own money. Why? Because perception was everything. They needed to control the narrative to keep the perception alive that the NCAA was 100% all about athletes and their education. But nobody ever gave a damn. Why was Michigan playing 11 games of basketball in 22 days? 15 games of basketball in 22 days. When the did they have time to go to practice? But they controlled the narrative, so they controlled the perception. That is legitimately what this all boils down to. Now, he did say that he doesn't think Roger Goodell himself is anti-gay or anti-social justice, but he did go after Jerry Jones, which, look, there's not a fan of the NFL that likes Jerry Jones. Hell, half the Dallas Cowboy fans don't like Jerry Jones. They're tired of him running his mouth. He's been the GM of that football team since what, 1989? Sure, up until 95, 96, they were the team. But since then, what have they done? What have they accomplished? Any other GM would have been fired 2 or 3 times over. Nobody can do this paperwork like me. We know, Jerry, nobody can do anything like you. By the way, he called Jerry Jones the real owner of the NFL. In other words, that's the guy with the most pull and the most weight. He's the one with the real influence is what he's saying. Now, whether or not that's a thing, who the hell really knows? What I do know is this. What is going to happen now is Washington's going to do an investigation. The NFL is going to do an investigation. They're going to be finding this reporter. They're going to be wanting to know the motives. Defamation may be a thing, but if any of this comes out and comes out to be true, I mean, it's only going to take a couple of athletes to step up and go, this has been my experience. And defamation won't be a thing because the first thing they teach you when you're studying mass comm or whatever the case is the one thing that can save you from a lawsuit is the truth, or at least the perceived truth. And him as a witness is going to hold water. Why? Because of his position in the NFL and the influence that he has. I mean, didn't he go on to say that people were talking about there was a really bad smell and it was just water? He called NFL fans idiots and all kinds of other stuff. Come on. He literally went after everybody. So this man pissed off the NFL. He pissed off Washington. He pissed off the fans. He probably made some journalists mad along the way. Probably pissed off Christians. 99% sure that he's made the gay community mad. 99% sure that he's made black people mad. I'm 99% sure he's made other ethnic groups, people of color, all pissed off. This man just pissed off everybody. Jerry Jones, everyone. Didn't he say the fans were high school educated alcoholics? State-run media. I don't have time to get into what state-run media is, by the way. I'm just going to tell you this. He just basically said it's all pretty much 1, 2, 3 groups, and they're all in cahoots anyways, and they're all controlling the perception. What are you going to do? You know, as this thing continues to go on, we'll figure it all out, but basically he said some things that I agree with. He said some things that I don't agree with on the football because the Chiefs are playing the Ravens tonight, which, by the way, Hollywood Brown, he's going to be out for the game. Baltimore Raven fan, I'll tell you all about that. Pretty much just plays when he wants to. Everybody knows this. Whether he's hurt or not, who the hell really knows? Ask Bijan Robinson. It could potentially be faked. Warren Sapp, what did he say? If you didn't feel like playing one weekend, just tell him you had a groin injury. He was like, that's a real hard one to prove. Just tell him you're out with a groin injury. I love McNabb, but he was out with a groin injury a lot. So, there's that. So, no Hollywood Brown. That's going to be a new guy. Juju's going to have to step up. Still got Mercole Hodman, Rashee Rice, Xavier Ward. Look, they're not going to be missing you-know-who, Kadarius Toney. They did go and get Samaje Perine at the last second from the Denver Broncos. We'll see how that pans out. I don't know how much playing time he's actually going to get, probably mainly in passing situations. If anything, they'll probably use him very similar to the way that they use Lamar Hunt. Probably line him up out in 5 wide and stick him down there as a wide receiver, basically in the deep slot. So you're going to see a lot of that out of the backfield, mainly for catching, which I'll be honest with you, I think Denver probably let him go because of the fumble that he had in the preseason, or the drop pass, I mean. So he's out. They drafted Audric Estime. What are you going to do? For the most part, they were able to keep the defense intact, but they are short at free safety, so it's going to be up to Brian Cook. We'll see if that pass defense is as good as they were last year. Obviously, everybody knows the Baltimore Ravens got Derrick Henry. Still got Zay Jones. Look, I'm going to say something a little outrageous here, and we're all entitled to it every now and again. I think the Baltimore Ravens, if you ask me, they are better without Mark Andrews. You look at how that football team did a season ago. They were, 7-3, 7-4 when he got hurt. They didn't lose another game until he came back in the AFC Championship game, and they were blowing teams out. They manhandled the 49ers. I mean, they had that 1L at the end of the season, but come on, they knew where they were at. They were going to get the first round bye, home field advantage. There was no reason to play anybody. Lamar didn't play. None of the starters did. The point I'm saying is while the starters were in there, after Mark Andrews went down, they were a phenomenal football team. I just think they're better without him. Safety blanket. Now, of course, the other big thing is going to be this. Baltimore Raven fan is probably still pissed off that they threw the football 82% of the time against that defense a season ago. As we know, the Chiefs are somewhat vulnerable in week one, but week one doesn't ever seem to matter because it is just that, only week one, which we're going to be getting into that with Colin Cowherd here in a little bit. The point of what I'm saying is I don't really think Baltimore views this as a revenge game. And I don't think they view it as a revenge game because the game that mattered, they lost. It's as simple as that. The play calling was atrocious. The run game was there. They didn't do what they needed to do. We all know why they went after Derrick Henry. They're trying to really do the pound and ground, or the ground and pound. But here's the problem, though. If all season long you keep doing this thing where you run the football like a mad dog and you're really good at it, but then you get to the playoffs and you go, well, let's just go ahead and change everything, then it doesn't really matter what you did all year long. I'm just keeping it a buck. Baltimore was the better team, but they were not the better coach football team. And for all you Lamar haters out there that say, well, he can't throw the football and he can't get it done and blah, 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 there's not a coach in the NFL that would have had a run game like Baltimore's a season ago, other than a Harbaugh, who would have saw that game against the Kansas City Chiefs and that 18th ranked defense against the run and thought to themselves, I should probably throw it a lot tonight. Doesn't matter if Kansas City's got one of the best pass offenses in the NFL. They won't see that coming. No, what it was completely overthought. They got out-coached in that football game, and again, it was a long, sustained drive by the Kansas City Chiefs in the third quarter that ultimately put the football game away. That was how they survived in the postseason. Long, sustained drives. That was how they did it. Now, I'm not saying I have anything against it. I'm just saying that's how they did it, all right? Who do I think wins tomorrow? I don't know. I don't know what Baltimore is going to look like with Derrick Henry. I don't know what Kansas City is going to look like this year after having one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL, arguably the worst. I mean, after all, they did lead the league in drops. They had 44. I mean, Kadarius Toney had, 27 catches and 5 drops? The biggest drop of the year for him was easily in week number 1. That should have told you everything that you needed to know. They were lining up off sides, cost them the game against Buffalo. They got to clean up that mess. We don't know if that defensive backfield is going to be as good this year as it was a season ago. But really, for the most part, a good majority of that was the front line, right? So you still got Chris Jones. The front line is a big part of why that defense was so good. They were getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and it made life easier for the defensive backs back there. Because if they got burned initially, then they had time to make up. You got your safeties back there in Sky just hanging out. We'll see what happens. I think it should be a good game. But I don't think it's a revenge game. I don't think Lamar Jackson's waking up and thinking to himself, this is a revenge game. I think for Lamar Jackson, this is week 1. And I think he just wants to get off to a good start to the season. And I think that he believes if they beat the best team in the NFL, then that will be the best way to start the season and will be symptomatic of what they are this year again. I think that's the way that he views it. All right, so Kylan Grunson, Roger Goodell, they've been running around talking about the new helmets. I'm sure everybody's seen those things. Now, according to old Roger Goodell, when he was on the Pat McAfee show, he was saying, look, our helmets have already tested. Our helmets are already that good. Our helmets are already that protective. What that does is it basically just takes it over the edge. That's literally what he was saying. That they've got other prototypes, and some of the players are wearing them right now. They're position-specific helmets. You know, an offensive lineman's going to wear this. A quarterback's probably going to be best for that, et cetera, right? And a lot of people have been talking about how it looks dorky. Look, I'm all for saving the brain. The negative is to all this, while it all looks goofy now and while a lot of us hate the rule changes, the fact of the matter is we don't know yet if this is actually doing anything to protect anybody right now, because a full generation has not gone by with all these different rule changes. I mean, for instance, I talked about the hip drop tackle pretty much all spring, all off season. One of the things that I pointed out, when it was literally a play that happened 1.31% of the time in the NFL a season ago. There were 17,441 tackles last season total. Of those 17,441, 239, according to the USA Today, were hip drop tackles. The amount of injuries, literally 6% of all hip drop tackles were injuries. But you look at the Mark Andrews situation and they'll tell you this is a serious thing when it happens, right? Gronk, he's talked about it. He got hip drop tackled. So what they're saying is they want to prevent serious injuries, but then again, we're talking about 1.31%. Serious injuries or injuries of any kind are inevitable in the NFL. But again, these are not players. He's not Patrick Mahomes anymore. He's a $500 million asset / liability. You've got to protect that asset to make sure he doesn't become a liability. That's all there is to that. Injuries are going to happen. I'm not a fan of them. I'm not sitting around going, oh boy, I hope somebody gets hurt. Except for Patrick Mahomes when he plays against Denver. I hope he wakes up in the middle of the night and he stubs his toe on the bedpost. Look, the point of what I'm saying here is, while I agree with a lot of the safety protocols, we don't know if it's doing any good. And to take something away that happens literally 1.31% of the time, meaning that there is a less than 1% chance you will actually end up getting injured from the hip drop, it's really difficult to tell. And when you are consistently saying, do not go up top, now what you have is you have these guys that are just flying into people's chest. They're like missiles, just going right at them into their chest, right at them into their legs, and they are getting knocked around, and it's not going to be long before a limb comes off, and I'm not even fucking around. The reality is we don't know if this is doing any good. I'm not saying that I'm advocating against it. I'm just saying we don't know. And when I did my piece on concussions, one of the things that Dr. Roush talked to me about, which, by the way, he'd been in sports medicine for over 20 years at that point, was when it comes to concussions, there's kind of an anomaly with it, right? And that is when you get older, you seem to heal faster from concussions. So that's kind of why the NFL has tampered with a lot of the rules that they have with concussions, right? It used to be, well, you're in concussion protocol, you're out for, what was it, the said 2 weeks. It was automatic. It was a given. Now, if they think you're healed and you're ready to go, then you're ready to go. Why? Because as you get older, your brain is healing from a concussion quicker. When you're younger, you're kept out longer because your brain isn't fully healed. Now, obviously, the first thing that would come to mind would probably be the development of the brain, right? You're not fully developed yet, so with good reason. But regardless, the other thing that he talked to me about was a cumulative effect, and that's with any injury. And, the other thing he told me was he didn't think it was inevitable that you would suffer a concussion or a major injury. But what he said was he's not really so much scared of if you get hurt one time, it's usually not really a big deal, right? It's really more about re-injuring the same thing over and over and over again. So when it comes to concussions, that's why the NHL set the precedent that they did, because they said, look, you get X amount of concussions, that's it, you're retired, and by the way, we're going to go ahead and help you out and give you money for the rest of your life. Now, why the NFL hasn't implemented something like that is kind of beyond me. But like I said, the NFL is all about the show anyways. I mean, how many times have I talked about this in the course of my show? Everything that they do is just the appearance. It's the appearance of caring about safety. They don't care about safety. They care about protecting their asset. Patrick Mahomes, the asset. Josh Allen, the asset. Lamar Jackson, the asset. It's a cruel world that we live in, but it's the way that it is, whether anybody likes it or not. All right, really quick here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. So Colin Cowherd went on one of his little rants where, once again, he doesn't even know what in the hell he really wants to even say, I don't think, half the damn time. Essentially, what Colin Cowherd was talking about was the blue bloods always rising to the top. Regardless of how they change things in college football, that basically, he said the more things change, the more they remain the same, is essentially what he was saying. That sure, they can do the voting on January 1, what he's saying. Sure, they could do the BCS, is what he's saying. Sure, they could do the 12-team or the 4-team college football, is what he's saying. Sure, they could do the 12-team college football, is what he's saying. But eventually, the blue bloods will always rise to the top. He said, did you look at the top 10? Was anybody surprised? Now, maybe I missed something, but he seemed very complimentary, which is weird because he'll be the first one to tell you that the SEC has been carried by Alabama, that the rest of the SEC really isn't all that great. It is what it is. My thing is, am I the only person on planet Earth that doesn't get geeked up on week number 1? Look, that was a good win by the USC Trojans. They fought for it. They earned it. They deserved it. They were on the brink. LSU didn't finish the job. Georgia Tech has a couple of, let's call it one decent win over Florida State. Given how they look right now, we may not even be able to say that in a few weeks. Next week, would they play Georgia State, Georgia Southern? Okay, Mizzou, they had a win over Murray State last weekend. They're not playing anybody spectacular this weekend. Miami beat Florida. He went on to be braggadocious about USC and called them a blue blood, Michigan, all this stuff. How no matter what, they're always, bro, stop it. Does anybody not remember how it ended with Lloyd Carr in Michigan? Dan Camp, Rich Rodriguez. How long did it take Jim Harbaugh? USC hasn't been anything since they lost to Vince Young and the Texas Longhorns, who, by the way, The last time they played in a national championship game, they lost, and that was way back in 2009. How long has it been since they were championship contenders? About 14, 15 years in between. Notre Dame, okay, cool. They beat Texas A&M. We don't know how good either one of. What I'm saying is we don't know how good anybody's going to be. We don't know how good Notre Dame is going to be. We don't know how good A&M is going to be. We don't know how good anybody's going to be, which is why I say voting shouldn't happen. And for me, my point is, okay, great. All the blue bloods survive, but they are surviving on what? Voters. Voters who put Miami, who put Nebraska, who put Tennessee, who put all these teams in the top 25 every fucking year. And every fucking year by week 5, we've already got it figured out that they were not that good. They're 2-2. They're 2-3. They're 3-2. They're not even in the discussion of winning anything except for maybe their own conference title. And that's really about where it stops. And that's usually not even the real talk anymore. It's kind of like, all right, well, they're not going to do anything. And the only time they get talked about is when you got an open segment and it's just all about how the university is crumbling before our eyes. It's never, why in the hell was there a top 5 or a top 25 preseason poll to begin with, voted on by a bunch of people who still think that Miami is what they were in 2001. They are not. For whatever reason, it never left their head, man. I understand that the older you get, the more it's like, oh, a couple years ago. And then all of a sudden you find out a couple years ago wasn't a couple of years ago. It was more like 8 or 9, 10 years ago. I've fallen into that trap, man. I get it. It happens. I've had to look stuff up before and like, man, I could have sworn that happened in 2017. Was that really 2011, bro? A few years ago was a few years ago, right? Right? It's just the way that it is. But that's why we got to keep youth in there. Fresh opinions. And this is why I also think we should get rid of the polls. Because you have people with their bias voting and deciding and judging as if football is supposed to be a beauty pageant. It is the last remaining piece of the puzzle that needs to be gotten rid of in college athletics. Then we'll find out how far the blue bloods can really go. But see, though, they're not going to do that, are they? Because they don't want to get rid of their blue bloods. No, they don't. They've got too many invested interests in USC, so they're going to rank them no matter what for as long as they can. Hell, I remember that season that Miami was, 5-3, 5-4, and they were still ranked number 20-something in the country. And all these people were talking about, well, it's their schedule. Well, it's their schedule. Well, you're the University of Miami. You're supposed to be dominating that schedule regardless of who's in front of you. So why in the fuck are you ranked when you're barely a 500 football team? I don't want to hear that. Stop it. This is the real world, people. And the true voices of reason are getting left behind because of narrative and perception. That's all there is to it. And whether anybody likes what I have to say about the SEC or not, I don't give a damn. I'm sorry that I'm bursting your bubble, telling you what's really going on. You don't have to like it. I get it. It fits your picture. It paints a pretty picture for you. It's an ugly nightmare to think that a company was so invested in a particular network that in order to make sure that it succeeded, they made sure that that conference did what it needed to do to rake in the dough. Sorry, folks. It happened. All right, real quick here. Patrick Surtain, $96 million. The Denver Broncos. Is he worth it? Well, for the 90 millionth time, I always tell people that it's not necessarily what you do on the field. It's what you're also worth off of the field. It's all about the marketability. It's all about the jersey sales. selling out tickets, etc. Now, does Patrick Surtain have the same ability to sell out tickets the way that Patrick Mahomes does when the Denver Broncos are on the road? No. Is he going to sell the hell out of jerseys, though? Damn right. Because people are going to recognize that name from my generation, and they're going to go, oh, man, I remember his pop. Yeah, no, I'll buy a jersey. I'm not a Broncos fan, but I'm a fan of him. I'm a fan of his pop, so they'll do it. Broncos fans are going to buy him by the dozen, so he's probably worth the dinero, predicated upon what he does on the field. I mean, legitimately, what else is there to say? It's either going to pan out or it's not. It's $96 million. It's a hell of a lot of money, regardless of how you slice it. It's not Patrick Mahomes' money, but it's a hell of a lot of money. And you're either going to produce or not. Now, me personally, as a Broncos fan, while I can appreciate them giving him the money, they've made so many other mistakes over the last 9 years, damn near a decade now, that I'm not really worried about the defensive backfield. Cool, bro, no fly zone. Great. Can I get a real quarterback in there? Because Bo Nix ain't it. Can we get an offensive line? Can we get a coach in who doesn't allow 70 points and then blames the quarterback? Can we get owners and shareholders who come in and go, we don't want anybody to change anything at the quarterback position with their money, and then threaten to bench him behind closed doors and create problems, literally creating a locker room situation that is going to implode because now you've created divisiveness. Why in the absolute would you do that? Why? Denver has bigger problems than whether or not they are paying Patrick Surtain II. I'm not saying he's not a valuable member of the team. I'm not saying he's a fucking good football player, because he is. Even with the penalties. What I am saying is this. Denver has to clean up the rest of their act before they can worry about who they're paying, who they're not paying, who they're drafting, all this other crap. I understand that life has to go on in the meantime, but Denver's got so much other BS going on right now that this just kind of seems small to me. That's all I'm saying. All right, real quick here. BB is on Instagram, for those who don't know. I just personally don't think he wanted to be on Snapchat, even though I think he's lying. I think he is on Snapchat. I just don't think he wants anybody to know you're not with a female that young, bro, and not have Snapchat. I'm just keeping it a buck. All right? In fact, I'm pretty sure he's always had it. Quick way to make sure those photos don't get leaked. Am I right? So basically, he's probably just going to be delivering analysis, all that stuff. I hated the way that he made it sound, though. It's like, oh, you know, I can never really. Well, I mean, you were the mastermind, and everybody credits you for the one who keeps stuff under wraps. I mean, don't forget, Tom Brady was asked about concussions. I'm pretty sure that reporter didn't have a job right afterwards. And then Brady said, my medical history is really none of your business. Okay, but if you have concussions and you're playing, that's illegal, broham. You're literally risking your life. People have a right to know about that. Certainly the NFL, again, swept it on the rug because narrative and perception. All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. The show's fired up, and we are live. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Take a device to play Fired Up by Drew Duncan, iTunes, iHeart. Wherever you're listening, I am there. Obviously, tomorrow, Austin Ford, our MMA insider, is going to be hanging out with us. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Ravens and Chiefs, and we're going to be getting into games from this weekend. Plenty of college football to talk about. NFL, Packers, the Eagles. Kickoff on Sunday for the NFL as well. In the meantime, your local programming is next. Don't you dare touch that dial.